I see Bernie Sanders' Mark has been playing Coachella.
Coachella?
Yeah, Coachella. Do you know what that is?
It's another one of your trick questions. You're going to make me look stupid again, James.
Well, I must confess, they were speaking about it in the Bureau. I hadn't a clue what it was.
Oh, good.
Apparently, it's a modern day Woodstock.
I thought it was a card game or something, playing Coachella. I'm Mark Stone.
And I'm James Matthews.
And on day 88 of Trump 100, the White House fights to shift the focus on its El Salvador deportations with a surprise late afternoon news conference.
And the Democrats are fighting for headlines of their own, with an eye to the midterms.
Let's start with the ongoing row over the deportation of Kilmar Albrego Garcia. We talked about him yesterday. He is, of course, the man deported to El Salvador in error by the Trump administration, an administration that insists that he is a terrorist. It has taken another turn today. It was kind of an oddly quiet day here, wasn't it, in DC?
Yeah.
In fact, I got on with my expenses, which I haven't done for a very long time. And then news that there was due to be a last-minute news conference.
It came from a post on X by Caroline Levitt, starting with the siren emoji, you know, that red flashing right. The post read, press briefing at 4:30 p.m. with a special guest. Tune in, exclamation mark.
I mean, naturally, when any White House press secretary says that, we all get excited, wonder who it's going to be. Lots of speculation as I arrived at the press room. No one seemed to know, even those that I know are very well connected to the Trump administration, didn't know who it was going to be. And then in walked Caroline Levitt. The press room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. And with her, a woman who we all recognised because she'd been on the news the previous day, Patty Morin, the mother of Rachel Morin, who was raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant from El Salvador back in 2023.
Why are we not protecting our children? Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this.
She, as you can hear there, told her daughter's story. It was extremely powerful. You know, James, there are moments in that White House press room that you remember. I remember a moment a few years ago now when the actor Matthew McConaughey turned up at the White House to make a statement about the shooting, the mass shooting at Uvalde in Texas. And it was an extraordinary moment. He was deeply, deeply angry. He banged his hand on the podium as he complained that how could there be another mass shooting in the United States. It was a moment I'll never forget, and this moment was another one of those, because the testimony from this mother, Patty Morin, was just heartbreaking.
If you're a mother here in the room, can you imagine standing there alive? You're alive, and someone comes and puts their hands into your chest and rips out your heart? That's what it feels like. It feels like a part of you is being ripped out of you. You can't even describe the pain.
Now, from the White House's perspective, this is all meant to underline the administration's point that their deportation policy is about removing dangerous criminals from the country. Mr. Garcia, the man that they have deported because of an administrative error, they say not only is that he is a gang member, a member of MS-13, but that he poses a threat to national security. He entered the United States illegally in 2011 and was arrested in 2019. Court documents show that he was suspected of being a gang member, partly because he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie with an image of the president with some currency hiding his eyes and face. It was the sort of thing that the police are aware can be affiliated with gangs like MS-13. So on that basis, they arrested him, believing him to be a gang member. But he was never convicted, never charged with anything. He was indeed released.
But he does have history. The Department of Homeland Security, they've shared a copy of a domestic violence restraining order that his wife filed against him, and they've coupled that with a post on X reading, "This MS-13 gang member is not a sympathetic figure." So they're still insisting he's in a gang and very much painting him as this dodgy figure. In many ways, an unfortunate poster boy for people that I saw outside court yesterday, people who see this as a fight to preserve the US Constitution and nothing less. And, you know, they view his return as central to that.
And so into this case of the Maryland man comes Rachel Morin with her story of unimaginable grief, laid out from the White House podium in such visceral detail. Grief and detail that I think clearly allows the Trump administration to prop up its court-defying decision to deport Mr. Garcia. The only link between these two men is that they both arrived in the United States illegally, and they both happen to be from El Salvador. It seems to me, James, that Trump knows the constitutional pressure that he is under, and he knows the power of this mother's brave testimony, but he's choosing not to recognize the conflation. A murderer who faced US justice and another man deported into a foreign jail without any US judicial process.
So nobody could have anything less than sympathy. That is true to say. For me, it's also true to say that this was very much a public relations exercise. Patty Morin, for me, was being used as a prop. The man who killed her daughter, he was from El Salvador. That murder happened in Maryland. But the question is, what does that have to do with Kilmar Abrego Garcia? The answer is nothing. The input of a grieving mother was deployed to shape public opinion behind the Trump administration on an issue that should be handled by the courts. Before we leave this story, Mark, there's one other important line on El Salvador deportations. More than 200, remember, were flown there. You'll remember the judge, James Boasberg. He was looking into whether there was criminal contempt in flying deportees to El Salvador, despite his ruling that the planes be flown back while he assessed the law on which they were flown out. Well, he's ruled to say there is a probable cause that, yes, there has been criminal contempt, that Trump administration officials might well be in contempt. Now, this could lead to officials being pursued for that crime. It's extremely rare and, as we discussed yesterday, very complicated. Now, we get a lot of emails asking where the Democrat resistance is in Trump 2.0. Well, we might have seen a glimmer of it on Wednesday. California's Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta announced a plan to sue President Trump. It's all over tariffs. What else? They argue that it was unlawful for Donald Trump to declare an economic emergency to impose tariffs, and that it's something that should have been passed by Congress. They're warning of immediate and irreparable harm to their state, the largest in the United States, and of course, its largest importer.
California, remember, if it wasn't a US state but was a country, it would have the fifth biggest economy in the world. It's not just the big tech companies of Silicon Valley that make it so wealthy. It has a large financial sector, lots of agriculture, tourism, of course, and it is a massive, massive manufacturing heartland of the United States. Newsom is using all this strength that it gives him to push back against Donald Trump. The federal lawsuit will be the largest legal challenge yet to Mr. Trump's trade policies.
Yeah, Newsom raising his profile as a potential contender for 2028. He's not alone, of course. We have the stadium tour currently of Bernie Sanders and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. They're filling arenas around the country with their Fight Oligarchy roadshow. AOC, she's the kind of rock star of the Democrat movement. She's raised more than $9 million since the start of the year. We'll see where that takes her. A lot of people think she's actually too liberal to unite the party, too liberal to tap into the voters who voted for Donald Trump. But there's no doubt the Democrats are looking for a leader to unite the party around a coherent message. They're looking for a credible messenger too. Currently, that party is some distance from both.
Yeah, coherent she may be, centrist enough to be a viable Democratic candidate.
Big question.
I doubt it. But AOC is not the only one drawing in the big bucks. Bernie Sanders hauled in over $1 million between January and March this year. Frustration among Democratic voters about a perceived lack of resistance to the Trump administration in the House and the Senate could well be fueling big donations. Will that translate into success at the ballot box? That's the question. We'll find out in the midterms. Not actually that long away now.
Yeah. Trump, 900 and something.
Yeah, back half of next year. Right, a couple of other things to mention before we go. There's been another development in the ongoing row between the White House and the Associated Press. Remember that one?
Yep.
Yeah, that was the curious case of the Gulf of Mexico, or is it the Gulf of America? Trump banned the Associated Press from covering certain White House events because they refused to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Well, a court had ruled that that decision by the White House was denying the Associated Press's right to free speech. But now the White House have kind of moved the goalposts, changed their own rules, so there is no longer a special seat reserved in the press room for what are known as the wires, that is the Associated Press, Reuters, and Bloomberg news agencies. So AP is saying that the White House is simply trying to get round the court order.
Yeah, not healthy, this. For all the talk about transparency and the amount of time that Donald Trump spends in front of the media, for me, he and his press people, they hide behind non-answers. And I actually don't see that changing anytime soon. They are skilled at batting away legitimate questioning.
At the beginning, I was quite encouraged. I thought we were all being given pretty good access. They were picking up the phones. They were doing interviews. And as time has gone on, that's changed a lot. The makeup of the press room has changed. The type of reporters that are in there has changed. They are much more compliant. And those that still have the front seats in the press room, the old traditional fake news media, as Donald Trump would call them, CNN, NBC, CBS, they still have the front row, but they're not getting the questions.
Yeah, for all this, this dirty word, legacy media, there's a lot to be said for legacy media experience, a knowledge of how to operate in that environment, and a knowledge about the subject matter. And goodness knows, as journalists, we need to be across the subject matter to ask the appropriate questions right now.
Now then, James, an update on Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Our friend,
Martha's friend. Of course, the representative from Georgia, very close to Donald Trump, one of his most loyal allies. She was doing a town hall down in her constituency in Georgia, and she was heckled on Tuesday night. But things escalated pretty quickly. 6 people were arrested, 2 people were tasered. MTG, as she's known here, had been facing criticism for the money she made investing in those days before Trump announced his tariff freeze.
Yeah, on that business of her selling her shares, she issued a statement, Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying her financial advisor controlled her investments, which is fine. That's so far so legal. Her problem is the politics of how this looks. Mm-hmm. And the question to her is, did she contact her financial advisor before these shares were sold? And if so, at what time of day? How did that coincide or not with Trump's advice to sell? I think if that's the case, if the call was made, that would invite greater scrutiny, or dare I say it, a taser. I'll let you ask that question, Mark.
Now, one last thing. A third member of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's team has lost their job in the Pentagon, according to Politico, apparently for leaking to the press. Remember, Hegseth is one of the Trump team who were found to have added journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, to a group chat when they were discussing airstrikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen. It seems then there have been repercussions for that error, even if it's not the big names.
Yeah, Pete, if you're listening, our address is TRUMP100 at sky.uk. If you've got any questions for our Q&A, or indeed national security leaks.
As always, you can follow the podcast for free on YouTube or on your podcast app so you never miss an episode.
Yeah, I was only joking, Pete. Not really. Anyway, that's it for day 88 of Trump 100. We'll be back tomorrow for day 89.
See you then.
Bye-bye.